pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and welcome to the January 21st, 2026 budget workshop of the Milford Board of Education. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Megan Doyle?
Here.
Jennifer Brown?
Here.
Mary Claire Edmonds?
Here.
Nicole Flowers?
Here.
Tom Toba?
Here.
Adam Scobie?
Here.
Hannah Tedros?
Here.
Nicole Wilhelm? Here. Cindy Wolf-Boynton?
Here.
Susan Glennon?
Here.
All right, all 10 members are present. Ms. Brown is virtual.
Thank you very much. All right. Normally we would have public comment tonight. I don't see any members of the public here. So we will move right into the final questions and discussion that we had. Dr. Kutai, I think you have some information for us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Glennon and members of the Board of Education. Appreciate the additional questions that were sent regarding the armed school security officers. So we decided to, as we have done in the past with certain topics, dig a little bit deeper through a presentation, if you will. We will be sharing information regarding the questions that were sent to us. If we happen to miss any questions, or we'll dialogue at the end. We ask that you do hold your questions because there's a lot of information coming your way. Mr. Brennan, Mr. Nielsen, and I will be sharing some of this presentation, and Mr. Brennan will be starting.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Kataya. So good evening, Board of Ed members. Just wanted to begin by making sure everyone's aware that Jeff Nielsen, our Director of Civil Security here, is in the room. Thank you for being with us this evening, Mr. Nielsen. As Dr. Kataya mentioned, Dr. Kataya, Mr. Nielsen, and myself, and I will be presenting this information to you this evening. Before we begin, I know many of you are very familiar with Mr. Nielsen, but I did want to provide him a brief opportunity to introduce himself and give a little bit of the history of his background and understand a little bit about his expertise and what he brings to this role.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Hello, everyone. How are we doing tonight?
Good evening.
Hi.
All right. So my name is Jeff Nielsen, for those of you who have not met me. I've been in this role for 10 years with the district. Prior to that, I worked at the Milford Police Department for 20 years. My last 7 years of that job really relate to what I do now. I worked in the crime prevention unit where I supervised that unit. A lot of my work involved working with the schools, both private and public, daycare centers, neighborhood watch groups, major corporations here, businesses in the town doing security assessments, security-related trainings, and things of that nature. My role now, in addition to what I do here daily, I also chair a Region 2 DEMIS School Safety and Security Working Group, which is comprised of about 30 towns and cities. And we have a really good peer group with superintendents, facilities directors, people in my role, IT directors, teachers, mental health professionals. We talk about a lot of these safety and security topics, not only affect local districts, but what affect everyone on a statewide level and a federal level. I also sit on the school advisory committee for KERMA, who is our risk provider. We've been doing that for about 5 years. So the reason I show this information is we get a lot of information shared with us from a state, federal, and local level, and we learn about best practices. And a lot of this information we use goes into programs such as this one to come up with what's best for our district. So I hope that information helps you out a little bit, and again, I appreciate you having me here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. So as I mentioned earlier, we understand that this is a big decision for Milford Public Schools, and we are grateful for the opportunity to have this dialogue here. We have already engaged in a bunch of data gathering throughout the process of thinking of this proposal, and with the questions that you guys provided, we have engaged in some additional data collection. This first slide here talks about, this slide. So imagine a slide here. This first slide talks about our why. While Mr. Giancolo, there we go. Restart the presentation, that's fine. So while Mr. Giancolo is working on that, this first slide really talks about the why behind armed SSOs. So I want to anchor back to Milford's Board of Ed commitment number 3, which is we are committed to creating and maintaining a safe and secure climate that promotes a supportive academic, social, emotional, and physical learning environment. So we are committed to school safety. School safety is our #1 priority, and it always will be. We pride ourselves on a layer of prevention. I don't know what happened. Did I click something wrong?
Must be hitting something.
Maybe instead of 4.
Why don't you
Use
click
the arrow.
the
Can you
remote
click the
down?
clicker down?
I'll take the clicker.
I think I got it. I think I got it. Thank you, Mr. Janko. So in Milford, we pride ourselves on layers of prevention. And if you take a look at these puzzle pieces here, I think it really outlines and clarifies some of our priorities when we're thinking about the world of safety. This first puzzle piece here, prevention, is a layered approach. And we take proactive measures as we think about all of our different systems that we provide throughout. And what we really want to look at is what can we implement to help reduce risk and injury and accidents and incidents before they even occur. So this includes written policies and procedures. We have multiple meetings with community members, internal teachers, staff members to make sure that our procedures, practices are all working according to the outline plan that we have. And we make sure that we're constantly reviewing those and making sure that they are adaptive and making sure that they are doing what we need them to do. These multiple layers are also with their security layers. We have access control, intercom systems, hardened vestibules, quick link devices, and other forms of technology, just to name a few of those security layers that we have in place. And then our partnerships. I think one of the things in Milford that we really benefit from are strong partnerships with our community members. Police, fire, health, just to name a few. This is not something that's necessarily a given when you think about other communities out there. So I really want to just say thank you to our community partners because they are very strong and they are always willing to help and provide input to us. So thank you to them for this, for their work with us. On this slide here, we outlined some additional things when we're thinking about why armed SSOs. So we do have an increased need to manage some of these threatening situations. That could include students, parents, family members, or external members that may or may not be in our community. Swatting and hoax threats, although those occur very infrequently, when they do occur, they are a significant disruption to our schools. And having layers of security in place to help mitigate that is something that's really, really important. And then another consideration when we're thinking about our elementary schools is that this population of students are outside very frequently. So we want to make sure that we have multiple layers in place. This population is outside more often than the other levels that we have.
And I think, Mr. Brennan, we also have had such a positive experience with our current SROs.
Absolutely.
That is another one of our guys, and that we have SROs in all of our middle and high school, armed officers, of course, and our relationship and work with them has been so positive that we believe that that has encouraged us to emulate that at the elementary level. So we've been asked about research and data around what caused us to go in this direction. So a little bit of on the ground, as Mr. Brennan already reviewed, our own experiences in our schools with our students and family and external individuals. But there's also some research and data that we'd like to go over with you. And there's been a lot of talk most recently, particularly on social media, and brought to our attention by a board member, the study done through the Violence Project. And the Violence Project, where you need to call it out, found that armed guards in schools don't reduce fatalities. Researchers examined 133 school shootings and attempted school shootings between 1980 and 2019, tallied up by the K-12 school shooting database. At least one armed guard was present in almost a quarter of cases studied, and researchers found no significant reduction in rates of injuries in these cases. So while this is a key piece of research that is often cited, and if you've been on Facebook lately, you've seen a lot of chatter about it, I think if you were to do a scan of the research, ask AI, do a deep dive into internet searches, I think the best result you would find is that the effectiveness of armed security officers or resource officers is mixed at best. There's a mixed effectiveness. But let's dive a little bit deeper, okay? There actually is a database that exists for averted school violence. So these are instances that have been studied where the actions of an individual wanting to bring harm to a school was averted, that they didn't complete their mission or their goal. So although mass violence attacks at schools are statistically rare, their impact far exceeds their occurrences. And I think that's an important note to think about, that while we may not have many experiences with this, we're not immune to the possibility of something occurring here in Milford. And this was supported by the National Police Foundation. So let's talk a little bit about how the National Police Foundation launched and found some more information about averted cases of violence. And I'm going to read from the slide. I'm sorry if that is bad presentation practice, but I'm going to do that this evening. The number of completed attacks is far outnumbered by incidents in which an attack was planned or was almost carried out but was averted, thanks to the actions of persons in the school or in the community. Individually, these incidents may be dismissed or only have a short-term localized impact because they did not achieve their goal, because they did not meet the requirements for a school to document the incident, or because of under-reporting in the media. While there have been a handful of studies conducted to identify common ways in which planned attacks were discovered, who intervened to prevent a likely attack, and the extent to which students reported potential planned attacks to authorities, there remains a considerable gap in the school violence literature surrounding averted attacks and what lessons can be learned from them regarding school safety and security. So in this world of research, this is stating that there is room for more research to be done. But there is some data out there. So let's keep going. So to address this need, this considerable gap in literature, in 2014, 2 United States Department of Justice offices, the Office of the Community-Oriented Policing Services, and the National Institute of Justice, provided funding to the National Police Foundation to develop and maintain an averted school violence database. Descriptive statistical analyses were conducted on 120 cases entered into the ASV database between February 2018 and August 2020. Analysis were conducted using the same information as in the 2019 preliminary analysis. So that points to there were 2 studies done, an initial in 2019 and then another one in 2020. Basic information about each case, followed by descriptions of the schools in which the attacks were averted, how the plots were discovered, what actions were taken to avert the potential incident, and what weapons the perpetrators planned to use. So let's go to the chart that summarizes, and I'm sorry if this is small for people to read on the screen, but board members, you do have it printed in front of you if that makes it easier for you to read. And just want to make sure, Ms. Flamme, that we have handouts. Okay. Okay, great. So this is a chart that summarizes the common security measures used by schools where potential attacks were averted in both samples of ASV incidents, the preliminary sample and then the new sample. So I'm going to bring your attention to the red boxes. The red boxes are currently strategies that we have in place in Milford Public Schools. So to support what Mr. Brennan was stating, we have a layered approach to security. It's not one thing that will help keep our children safe, but all things that come together. Let me bring your attention to the line that states security officers or police officers at or in school. And if you follow that line all the way to the right, you will notice that in their initial sample, 58.8% of the schools that averted violence had an armed officer on school grounds. And 45.8% in the new sample had an armed officer on school grounds. So there is some data out there, collectively here on this chart, at least points to, in about half of what has been studied through this database, that armed officers were instrumental in helping to avert violence. Let's go to some examples that we may find as well. I'm pulling this from some headline news. 2024, September 2024. Officials say 2 school resource officers in Windorf, Georgia played a big role stopping the gunfire that killed 4 people at Appalachia High School. Investigators say an encounter with one of the men ultimately led to the surrender of a 14-year-old accused of killing 2 fellow students and 2 teachers. You will see in the white box an interview that was conducted in talking about this incident in Georgia. Lori Sorensen, assistant professor of public administration and policy at the University of Albany, sat down with NPR. Martinez with NPR asks, is there research or data to suggest that school resource officers are effective at combating gun violence? Because, I mean, I guess how do you know if someone is deterred just by the presence of them, right? That stat never gets logged. Sorensen responds, yeah, it's one of those things that's it's very, very difficult to study because they're such rare events. We don't observe the counterfactual. We don't observe the cases where SROs were able to prevent a school shooting that never happened. And so I would say what researchers have been able to look at is whether SROs can prevent violence more generally in schools. And the evidence on that is very mixed. Sometimes we see that they reduce violence. I've seen that a little bit in my own research, that they can reduce fights, for instance. And sometimes we see that they actually increase reported crime. And finally, let's go to the example of what occurred in Dixon, Illinois, where school resource officers stopped the school shooting by identifying the shooter, chasing him off campus, and actually tackling him down, preventing him from shooting and killing anyone in that instant. So I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Nielsen, who has another bit of information in the world of research that he is much more intimately knowledgeable of. So I'm going to pass things over to him.
Thank you. I don't know if Mr. Bradley handled it right.
Only press that one button.
This is one
No.
Okay. All right. So just continuing with a little bit of research. This picture on this screen is from the U.S. Department of Justice FBI report. Annually, they do an active shooter incidents in the United States report. This screenshot is from the educational industry. And there's 2 pieces on here. There's a law enforcement response time, an average time, and there's an average incident duration. So as you can see here, the average response time for law enforcement is 1 minute and 48 seconds. Duration time is 3 minutes and 18 seconds. Time is very critical in these incidents. And going back to my introduction to you about my experience with law enforcement, I did 20 years in law enforcement. And I can tell you that a response time isn't defined. It's not perfected. There's a lot of variables that go into that. And the Milford Police Department does a great job here in our city of Milford, keeping us safe, providing to our, coming to our incidents in a timely manner. But the variables that come into this sometimes are beyond our control. If you look at call volume, if you look at traffic, if you look at weather, all these things impact how long it takes for an officer to get from point A to point B. So in a perfect world, when you look at this average of 1 minute and 48 seconds, it could be longer or it could be shorter. we have no control over that, and sometimes neither does the police department. Having a resource who is familiar with the layout of the buildings and our daily activities is important to what we need here to fill that gap. Having a dedicated, trained, properly equipped resource on school grounds provides an immediate response rather than waiting for a response. The person's already there, they're trained, they're equipped to manage that type of threat. Some of you may have seen this comparison in the last presentations, but we'll go through it again. Line by line here, you can look at this and kind of read it for yourselves. As we know, an armed school security officer by state statute has to be a retired law enforcement officer in good standing. We've discussed that before. They have extensive experience and skills. They're focused on safety and security. They have a dual lens approach to safety in our schools. They come with a minimum of 15 years of experience, which we'll talk about in the next slides. And they come to us with that, and then they're brought into our school district, and they're trained in what we do here. They're trained in our emergency procedures. They're working in our buildings every day. And I can tell you from first-hand conversations with people who work in this profession in other school districts, they know the 5th and 6th car that comes through the driveway every day. They know who's driving that car. They know everything that happens on that campus. That's why these roles are so critical. So let's go through program development and job description and supervision. So our job description hiring process will be very comprehensive. We'll see that in some of the next slides. We'll have a robust training program that exceeds state requirements. We're going to have a standardized reporting process under the direct supervision of the lead armed school security officer and myself. So as far as the responsibilities in the building administrators will work with those armed school security officers, but for direct supervision for safety and security related items, they will have direct supervision through us. The program evaluation that we're going to do here will include individual performance evaluations of all of our employees, which we do anyways. And in addition to that, there'll be feedback through our school climate surveys where we're going to put in questions to get valuable feedback from people in our school community as how this program is going to work and what improvements we can make. One thing I think we've done here is we've really done our due diligence. We've collaborated with other districts. As I mentioned before, I chair that Region 2 School Safety and Security Working Group. That's a great advantage for us in all the districts who work in it because we share a lot of ideas. And we were able to reach out to some of the districts, just to name a few here on the slide, is Newtown, Orange, Monroe, Oxford, Seymour, and Sonia. And we were able to gather very valuable documents and best practices from them, which will help us define what will work for Milford as far as a job description, a board policy, an MOU with our police department regarding training and how we're going to do things with them. SSO handbooks that outlines roles and responsibilities, which are clearly defined. Training considerations. And I think the most valuable piece of this is stories about positive feedback that they get from their students and their staff and their families as to how that school security officer is part of their school community. I can share with you, recently I spoke with another district, and they told me a story that they have a floater or substitute school security officer that was at a school. The other one's out for maybe 3 or 4 days. Parents, kids, staff, all coming up to the school administrator saying, where's Mr. Jones? Why isn't he here today? We miss him. That's valuable. It's very valuable. So in your packets, I think you'll see a job description. This is one of many that we've collected from those partnering districts. And you can go through this now, or you can go through it at your own leisure, but you'll see there's several areas in here that are going to help us develop a very good job description. And then we will incorporate things that we think are going to work well for Milford. Just to go through a few of them, this document is going to basically provide the details that is going to be safeguarding and protecting our school campuses, right? That person is going to support the school administrator and the staff in that building. So when you go through the document, it'll talk about position, summary, and purpose. It'll talk about supervision, which I think is very important here. Minimum qualifications, knowledge, skills, abilities, equipment, the physical and mental demands of the position, essential duties and functions, and some of the prohibitions. So when we get into qualifications, there's several of them. Some of them are very generic ones that you see in any type of job, but there are very specific qualifications for this role, because this is an important role. So I first would like to highlight U.S. Federal Code 18 U.S.C. 926C. I'm not going to read this off the slide to you, but basically, under this law, this is the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act, which provides the ability for a retired law enforcement officer in good standing with a minimum of 10 years to carry a firearm after they retire. So this is a federal standard. This federal standard provides guidance to the state law here in Connecticut, which is the next one, 10-244A. So in that one, basically says it has to be qualified law enforcement as defined in that federal code. They have to successfully complete a firearms qualification annually that meets or exceeds the Police Officers Standards and Training Council firearms requirements here in the state of Connecticut. And they have to be retired or separated in good standing from such departments. So you'll see that language in good standing a lot, right? And I know there's been some recent news articles that have talked about what good standing is, right? I think most of us have probably seen those. So we're going to get into that a little bit more into what we're going to do here additionally in Milford to define that. So on this slide, these are things that are specific for Milford, right? So we've looked at what the federal requirements are, we looked at the state requirements, and now this will be Milford's requirements for this position. We're going to require a waiver from applicants so we can look at their former employers' personnel files. So we can dig deeper into, do they have any type of past history where we think they may not be a good fit in our schools. We have to make sure that that person is going to be a good fit for the school climate that they're going to be serving in. As you can see on bullet 2, these are some standard things that we go through with all of our applicants here until you get to the bottom. Again, retired in good standing as required by Connecticut General Statute. They have to have received an honorable discharge if they were ever served in the military. If there was any type of mental health issues involved with their employment, they were documented or acknowledged, that would be taken into consideration here as well. One additional thing here is we're going to require that they pass and complete a psychological evaluation as part of their employment offer. Some of the other things here is interacting with youth. Having the ability to connect with youth in diverse student populations is very important. We want to make sure, again, they're going to be a proper fit for school climate here in the city of Milford. They have to be adept at mental health crisis response and have to be physically able to respond to emergencies. So many of these things, when we talk about mental health, when we talk about interaction with different groups, law enforcement officers have done this. They've done this in their jobs for, again, we're looking at people with a minimum of 15 years experience. They have experience in all this stuff. Above providing those safeguards to our schools, right? Being able to protect in the event of a life-threatening situation. They're able to communicate with people. They're effective communicators. They're effective listeners. Also in your packet, you'll see there's a sample of a Board of Education policy. Again, that's from one of our partnering districts that we obtained. So these are just two of several documents that we have. Several of the other ones are confidential in nature to those districts, so we're able to share those at this time. but they are documents that are going to help us, again, develop a very successful program here in Milford. Training. So, the state of Connecticut requires that annually an armed school security officer goes through an 8-hour course. Again, I'm going to go back to some of the recent media articles on this. I'm sure a lot of you saw this. And we agree there should be more training for these armed individuals, right? They're going to be working in our schools. They're going to be part of that school climate. So there's a lot of additional training, which we'll talk about on the next slide. But this particular requirement by the state, this training includes gangs, drug trends, threat evaluation and reporting overviews, incident command in schools was one of the topics I did one year. I've been to these for the past 3 or 4 years, and they're good trainings, but more is needed. We don't disagree with that at all. The second part of this is annual firearms training. This is going to be provided by a certified firearm instructor that meets or exceeds, and that word exceeds is very important here, the standards of the Police Officer Standards and Training Council, or the federal code that we talked about before. So going back to those qualification slides. So exceeds. Our training here, whether it's in firearms, use of force, any of our in-service trainings, all of those trainings are going to exceed what's required of this position currently. And that's important. We understand the need for that, and we will ensure that that is going to happen. So this slide is specific to us in our district. So if you look at the first 4 items in here, de-escalation, use of force, active aggressor, safe handling and storage of firearms. These 4 trainings will be done directly with the Milford Police Department. This is a very common practice with a lot of the partnering districts that we've worked with, and it's documented in a lot of their, whether it's their MOU with the police department, whether it's their roles and responsibilities, their training programs. So this is a good step. When we continue to go through these, a Connecticut Guard card, this is required for anyone who works in security as a guard, whether it's armed or unarmed. Youth mental health and first aid, CPR to AED, the administration of Narcan, which is an opioid overdose control measure, certified traffic control. They'll be assisting with traffic during arrival and dismissal times at our schools. So if any of you have ever gone to our schools before, you can see it gets a little busy sometimes, right? They're trained to do that, and they've done that type of work for the last at least 15 years of their career. PMT training, that's the physical management training. They'll be made aware of this, so they have an understanding of it, but they will not be involved in that. That is the job of the teams that are identified in those schools. School climate, stop the bleed training, and we're also exploring additional comprehensive training with NASRO, which is the National Association of School Resource Officers. They've actually recognized the importance of training for the school security officer. So they've provided a 3-day course for this, which there's several districts in the state of Connecticut that are looking into this. I know Weston just offered it this past year. So again, with our contacts with all these partnering districts, we're looking to bring this to Milford for our people as well. So if you look at the ones that have asterisks next to them, I just want to note this for 1 second. De-escalation, active aggressor, school climate. The Connecticut Center for School Safety conducted a survey in 2025 with Connecticut district employees, and those employees range from administrators to mental health professionals, security personnel, teachers, etc. Regarding training opportunities they'd like to see school security officers have, right? And those were in the top 5. So we were already on top of this even before the survey went out. And again, I work very closely with this group. I sit on several other focus groups on preventing targeted school violence. They're going to be doing additional research in this area and trying to get some change in the standardization across the state for training. But we recognize that in Milford, and we were going to take those steps individually. Uniforms and equipment, I think this slide was presented before, but just to go through this quickly, I wear this uniform every day when I come to work. It's a polo shirt, it has our logo on it, it says security on it, relaxed cargo pair of pants. We consider that in law enforcement world as a soft uniform. Used in community policing, it's very approachable. Many of you have probably seen our school resource officers, what they wear. They wear kind of a different uniform than the officers who are on the road every day. We want to make sure people are comfortable with what we wear and how we look, but we also want to make sure that it looks formal, right? That we're identifiable, and most importantly, that we're a deterrent. When we go back to prevention, as Mr. Brennan said, prevention and being a deterrent is a main part of this program. We don't want someone coming to our school to do bad things. We want to prevent that. Firearms and related equipment will be issued and maintained by the Milford Police Department. This slide has been presented before, but I will go through this again. None of this equipment will be stored on school property. Again, the people that we'll be hiring will be retired law enforcement professionals who have been doing this for at least 15 years of their life. They do this every day. That, coupled with the direct supervision, again, of the lead school security officer, myself, and how we'll be working hand in hand with the Milford Police Department with our training to refresh and reassure that this is followed. Again, I think we'll, promote our program to where it needs to be. And lastly, as always, our emphasis is on prevention. I'm confident, and we're confident, that this path will greatly enhance our safety and security posture here in Milford. It'll create positive relationships between these school security officers and our school teams, our parents, our students, and visitors to our campuses. As I mentioned before, I've had countless conversations with people about this. People that I used to work with who work in different districts. People that I've met who are administrators who oversee these programs that never had any law enforcement experience. And everything is positive, very positive feedbacks. Some of them even offered to come and speak on behalf of us. That's how passionate they are and how much they believe in these programs in their districts. So I appreciate your time, and allow me to speak. I guess I'll turn
We're
this
happy to
back
take
over
any questions, Ms. Glenn.
Dr. Katai.
Questions from board members on what we've heard? Ms. Flowers?
Can you just help me understand how a waiver works to access former employee files? Is that across the country?
That's, across the country, I'm not sure, but it's a common practice here in Connecticut, especially with law enforcement agencies. Say, for example, I was a police officer for 10 years and I went to another agency. Their background check would include request, having a waiver done for that person so that they could see the files from the prior employment.
Okay.
We would have that same arrangement on our side, very similar.
So if someone, say, came to Milford but had been a police officer in another state, how would you access their records?
Same way.
Same way, waiver.
Same way.
So this is across the board?
This would be across the board, yeah. We would put this in place for anybody, whether you're a retired police officer from the state of New York, Hawaii, Arkansas, wherever it may be. This would be in place. And we like this practice because we're going to attract good candidates, right? If someone has something to hide, they're going to say, well, I don't want you to see my employment records, right? If they were retired in good standing and didn't have any discipline issues, then they're going to sign the form and we're going to be done, we're going to move on with our process. So I think it's a step in the right direction. It's very new to a lot of districts here. And again, I've spoken to a few, and they like this idea and they're actually following up with it as well.
Okay. And then the psychological evaluation. I'm just curious, are these other cities, is this extra? Sorry, or is this something extra we're doing, or is this something that the other cities are doing as well?
So some of the peer districts I work with, I'm not for the mayor if they're doing this. I know that's something that I brought up to the administration here,
Okay.
that I felt was important, again, because I came from that world of, it was standard for us.
Yeah.
You know, you're carrying a firearm, and there should be additional evaluations and additional background checks that should be done on these individuals. So we feel it's important. We feel those two things will provide us with a better understanding of who we're going to have, right?
Do you think they need to have follow-up psych evaluations as the years go on?
Not necessarily, I mean, we'd have to look into that. I know in my profession, we didn't do that. We had our initials when we were hired, but it's something that could be looked into.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Evans?
Thank you so much. I have to say, I really like the waiver in there. I'm wondering, in my experience, I feel like it's important to learn from both the good and the bad. And you referenced the Connecticut Insider articles that recently came out. I'm wondering if you've had any contact or dialogue with the 10 districts that have faced challenges with their SSO programs, either with vetting or training or implementation?
I haven't had a contact with any of those, no. The ones I've had contact with have been ones that, and I've been in contact with them for a little bit of time, so that article probably came out the last week or two. You know, reaching out to them probably would not be a bad idea on my part. I just don't know how that conversation's gonna go, because now that it was mentioned in an article, they may be a little sensitive to speaking about some of those things, right?
Gotcha. I also really appreciate the detailed list of trainings. I like that there's more detail in there now about the youth focus and a little more detail about the mental health. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit further about how those trainings will be implemented, in the sense of prior to beginning their job, and then throughout, of course, there's ongoing professional development. So can you speak to which of those trainings will be like a non-negotiable before we throw you into an elementary school, you're hitting these boxes?
Yes. Well, I think all the trainings we would like to have done prior to them being assigned to a school. Obviously, we have to look at the availability of those trainings. The district trainings we do here, obviously, those would be available to us. So many other ones, I know we partner with Milford Prevention Council on some of these as well, so we'd have to see what their schedule would be. Again, planning this out, you know, months in advance is obviously gonna help us with scheduling and making sure we can do this. My intent is to try and compile these trainings within a week of time, or a little bit longer, prior to the school year starting, if this program is approved.
Do you envision being able to hire all 10 of the SSOs at the same time? In the sense, I mean, to your point of having a week of training before the school year starts, will everyone be hired by that point?
I think if we have everything in place, I think we could expedite that. We have a really good solid team here. Our talent management development team is very strong in what they do. Obviously, you can see the pool of candidates we get through here all the time, and the people we hire. So I think collectively we can, you know, try to accomplish that.
So just to make sure I'm understanding, if someone, let's say you can only find 8 people and they're great, they get started, they go through the training, if 2 more people show up in October, will there be a subsequent week of training that just the 2 of them go through? Or how would that work? Would there ever be a situation where they'd be starting the job without having gone through the full onboarding?
I think the required trainings, obviously there are some mandated trainings we would have to do with them. And there's some other ones, obviously our DCF training, our sexual harassment training, and bloodborne pathogens of that nature, but all the ones specific to carrying a firearm, anything that's going to fall in that parameter will be done before they are employed in that district.
It's my personal opinion. I think that some of those other super important topics that are more focused on interactions with the population that they're working with, maybe it might be an important consideration to think about which
Yeah.
of those.
And I'm very big on in-person trainings. But we can also look at some type of, virtuals or remotes, like that we can do with that as well, some videos and things of that nature. And then maybe follow up with those trainings as well, the in-person, right? I think we'd have to kind of see how that training schedule works, right? And the timing of hiring people. So to give you a definite answer would be very, very difficult for me, but in a perfect world, yes, I'd love to have everything done right away.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you for the question.
I have two other things that I'd like to just bring up. One is from the study that I believe was referenced in the very beginning of the presentation that I had shared along with my questions. And I just wanted to read a quote from it, which is, the data suggests no association between having an armed officer and deterrence of violence in these cases. An armed officer on the scene was the #1 factor associated with increased casualties after the perpetrator's use of assault rifles or submachine guns. The well-documented weapons effect explains that the presence of a weapon increases aggression. Whenever firearms are present, there is room for error, and even highly trained officers get split-second decisions wrong. Prior research suggests that many school shooters are actively suicidal, intending to die in the act, so an armed officer may be an incentive rather than a deterrent. The other thing that I just wanted to share was that I had a moment when this presentation was shared a little bit earlier to reference the study that was brought up second about deterrence. And I was able to, I believe that I'm referencing the same study from the Averted School Violence Database. Just wanted to reference something from in there too, which was the Who Discovered the Plot section. So this says, as shown in figure 9, which I'm sorry that you can't see, no plots were discovered by SROs. And the discussion really relates back to the fact that kids and teachers and mental health workers were the ones who discovered the plot. Plot being the deterred violence. And that none of the data in that data set were discovered by an SRO. After they were discovered by a teacher or a student or another staff, they were reported to law enforcement, and law enforcement came and arrested whoever it was. I also noted in that study that all but 2 of the schools in there are high schools and middle schools and colleges. And so there were only 2 elementary schools in this study. And many of the, much of the information about who the plotters were in this case, of how it got deterred, was unfortunately students. Which is so sad, I hate to even say it. But I'm just curious, of course, all of this is incredibly scary and sad, but I'm wondering, based on the first data point that I shared about not just that it was net neutral, but that armed school security officers increase casualties in scenarios where there's an assault rifle. And then this, where it says the data that was shared is really more about high schools, and that none of the cases were discovered by a school security officer. Can you share what of either the first study shared or the second study shared, and maybe Dr. Kadai, this is more of a question for you, how are you, I know that you said being a deterrent and prevention are the main purposes for this role in our elementary schools. So can you just speak to a little bit more of how, at least the data I've seen so far doesn't show that, it shows the opposite?
Well, we could spend this evening cherry picking data points out of research articles that are in front of us. And my conclusion on scanning the internet is that you'll be able to find any data point you'd like to defend your position. At the end of the day, the research is mixed. And here's a data point that that's not published anywhere, Ms. Edmonds. And I've shared this with previous boards. It was only a couple of years ago that we had an incident in Milford where we had to deploy a police car to every elementary school. And it lasted a week. And it involved not just state level, but national security. And that was real to me. And we were able to deter in that way. But that included a whole lot of resources from the police department that started to peter out toward the end because they have a city to take care of. So my research is my experience. So that bullet that Mr. Brennan very eloquently and professionally covered doesn't really say it all. We are experiencing heightened threatening situations here. And I have enough confidence in the research that I read through, whether there's something there in elementary schools or not. There's also stories out there from educators who have armed security officers and talk about the benefit. And that's not quantitatively or empirically supported. But there's qualitative and experiential data that I don't want us to dismiss. Because while we do need to look at the research and be professional about this is like an incredibly difficult and important decision. There's also an element that is experiential. And being an educator today is much more scary than any other time. And some of these studies are going way back to when possibly times were less violent. I don't know. I don't know that our grandparents and grandparents would agree, but I feel like it's the most violent in our schools today. So no, I don't know if I can engage in how is this study more important, how do I weigh this data point. At the end of the day, I'm a superintendent held responsible for being able to open school doors the next day and knowing that we've done everything possible. And my personal experiential recommendation is we need another layer of security. That's the best way I can answer your question.
Thank you.
Ms. Doyle?
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you I know this is the second time I've seen some elements of this presentation, and it's been very helpful. Because I think, sadly, we go to the mass casualty event that we're all thinking about. We're thinking about those terrible events, which no one wants to hear. You know, we all get the emails, and we're like, what's gonna happen? And, you know, we're down the street from Newtown and everything else. But I really appreciated hearing about the other activities that are involved. It's about the upset parent that comes to school, or the family member who's not supposed to pick up a child, or who's trying to get into the building, who's wandering around, who has a drone flying around the area. What are these situations, or knowing that school? Because I walked into this first conversation months ago skeptical. And I've read the online conversation, thinking about those things. But I think this is the next step of where we need to go, because we don't know what's going to happen. We live in a violent world, and I think it's most important as a district that we support our children. And it's scary, and it's unfortunate that this is the next step we need to take, but I think we've already done a lot of due diligence, and I know that we will continue to do that work, and we'll do that over and over again. And I can look to our SRO program, which has been in the school for a number of years. I can't tell off the top of my head.
11, 12 years.
Okay,
It
11,
was
12,
2013.
2013. And I remember when that happened and skeptical of like, why do we need police officers in our schools? And you know what? They're just part of the community now. They're just part of there, and it's just a normal part. And I think this is how we're going to proceed in the future, is that deterrent effect.
Ms. Todd, can I add a story to that? Do you mind?
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell a story in generics. So kick me if I'm getting too detailed, okay? Last Thursday, we had a threatening situation in one of our elementary schools. I think it consumed the entire cabinet and consumed the leadership team at that building, mental health, DCF was involved. Mr. Nielsen, 3 police officers from MPD, 2 were stationed, all to deter a possible incident. And we were on the ready. There was an incident that was going to occur off campus that could have triggered X, Y, and Z. So we had to lay everything out. Those kind of things with the dynamics of families and custody and courts and are becoming just a regular part of how we do business. That now it's, oh, you were supposed to go walk a school for teaching and learning? No, we're gonna go over here and take care of a security issue. It's just becoming part of our everyday world. And I don't know that board members or parents would even know the degree to which we deal with it, because we just do it as an operational thing now. But we have those stories every day. Last Thursday just happened to be, there were many more resources deployed to this school. We were all on the ready. We're all like on the text, okay, we're getting the call, and nope, it's off. So that kind of story is not something that you're getting an email from me about. But those are just the regular threats that we deal with.
And so, thank you, I appreciate that, because it's also taking a lot of time and resources from other activities that we need to engage in when these sort of events occur.
Safety is
Which obviously, safety is safety, but, you know, sometimes we can prevent some of that. Coming back, I do have a question, now that I got there. These SSOs are not intended to be involved in discipline in any way. They're not intended to interact with the children in that kind of disciplinary matter. They're intended for supervising, to make sure this building's safe. They know where things are, to know who the 5th car that pulls into the driveway, which I know, I see those the lines. It's almost always the same every single day when we walk by. So, is that correct?
Correct. Their primary responsibility is to safeguard that campus. Anything that's going to be involved in discipline of students, that's the administrative team, and that team is in place to do that.
Right, and if there was a situation where something required a police officer, the 911 or Milford Police Department would be called, and a police officer would come and take care of that. The school security officer would be stepping out of that situation, providing their perspective, but they're not responsible for that kind of.
Yeah, the SSO's responsibilities would be to step in when there's some type of situation that there's a threat of harm to someone or somebody else, right? It's imminent. That's when they would step in and assist.
And we're talking primarily, never mind, I don't want to go there. So that's it, thank you.
I think it's, one thing that I think it's important to state is that we have security personnel at our high schools, and we have, we don't have security guards at the middle school. We have the SROs at the middle school, correct? There's no security personnel in place at the elementary schools at all. We have the
We have a greeter, but that's
a greeter
not
and a principal.
considered.
Yes, those are not security personnel. So that's just something that I've thought about in this conversation, was that we do not have any security personnel in our elementary schools right now. You have other questions? Yes, Mr. Scobie.
I have a few, and my notes are all scattered, so this might be like all over the place. Sorry, I need to jump around. Okay, the first one I had, Nicole kind of covered. Regarding the psych evals, I had a similar question. I appreciate that the psych eval was mentioned, because I know when we talked about this back in October, that was like my big question, and it was like, oh, you know, we haven't thought about that yet, but it sounds like a good idea. So I'm glad you put it in here, like, yes, we're going to do it. But I had a similar thought of, you know, it would be great if we could have more than one psych eval, not just like when they get the job, but I don't know what an appropriate amount of time is. I don't know if it's every year or every other year, just something of the sort, just, again, because they're gonna be specifically in the elementary school around little kids. So I know typically, I would imagine any of the bigger conflicts that they're dealing with is probably not going to be with a bunch of 7-year-olds. It will probably be with parents or whoever showing up. But because they're going to be around so many little kids all day long, I would appreciate if they had some kind of recurring psych eval, just to kind of cover bases. So I'm just throwing that out there. I hope that's something we can talk about more in the future. Regarding the training, I was just wondering if you could elaborate, or if anybody here can elaborate, just a little bit more on what the school climate training, just like bullet points, high level, like what that would be covering.
Sure. I'm not a school climate specialist, but I can say that, again, some of the areas that, and this is awareness to them, right? So like you may have restorative practices, for example, uplift trauma. You know, we do that one day per day, one every year, maybe some of the topics that are covered in that. Things are specific that we do district, and things change sometimes too. You're hearing these presentations from, you know, school climate specialists on different programs we're doing every initiative. So as those things evolve, then if we feel there's a need to put them in those types of trainings so that they are aligned with what we're doing to provide a positive school environment for our students, we would make sure they're involved in those.
Perfect, okay. I was hoping that was somewhat of
Yeah,
the
that would be
answer.
a partnership that I would do with, you know, Dr. Gillespie and other people who are doing those programs.
Cool. Okay. The other question I had regarding training, there was 3 that had an asterisk, and you said, I don't remember the name of the organization that you mentioned, but you said that these are 3 of the 5 that they recommend. I'm curious what the other 2 are, and if they could be added to this list, if you know, necessary.
They are, but they're already part of our, it's emergency training and emergency protocols, which we already do. That's part of our standard thing we do with everybody in our district.
Perfect.
All the way down to substitute teachers.
Okay, cool.
And the other one, I'd have to look at the list, but it's probably something we cover already.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. It's, you know, 3 out of 5 out of this group said we should do this. I was like, well, what about the other 2?
Well, it's not
So
just
it's
that we
good to
do,
know.
but these are things that these were, it was an exploratory survey done by the Connecticut Center for School Safety of that school employee group, and things they thought,
I
they
see,
think that
okay.
school security officers should have training in.
Yes, so it was more of a request survey, not a
Yeah, what, you know,
organization
what do you
said
think
this
is most important, right? And
I
what
understand
will
now.
people be interested in, and a lot of those we already cover.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood originally.
I apologize if I was.
No, I think that was on me, but thank you. This one is more for the cabinet. So I know the board typically does not get involved when it comes time to hiring and vetting and all that, right? I understand that is typically on the team sitting around here, right? But something that I hope that the board could be more involved with in this case, and I say this because I need to backtrack. I meant to open with this, so I'm going to say this first, then I'll go back to this. Mr. Brennan opened with saying that, you know, one of the commitments is creating a safe and secure environment for the students, right? I think everyone here agrees with that sentiment. And I also, you know, I hate that we have these conversations because I think it's kind of crazy that we even need to talk about having armed guards in any schools. But I also think a lot of people understand that, like, this is another layer of security and it needs to be discussed. So jumping back into what I was saying, I think this is a really delicate but critical decision, and this is the only reason why I'm bringing this to the table, but I also know this is not typically our place. But I hope that moving forward, if this is approved in the budget and everything, and kept in the budget, that moving forward, that we'll have say in the policies. So I know there's a policy here. This looks like the policies that we typically help generate, so I assume that would be one of the things. Okay, perfect. The other thing I was hoping that we could have disclosed to us moving forward is just the hiring process, the interviewing process, and kind of the vetting process that's planned on being used for this. I don't necessarily want to say we should be allowed to approve it, because I know that's not really where we go, but I at least want to have an awareness of what's going on and maybe provide feedback like we normally do. Same thing with the SSO handbook that was mentioned. I'd really love to get a chance to look at that before it starts getting implemented so that we can maybe provide some feedback on that.
Did you mention a handbook?
That's one of the documents that we would share with us.
Pulled
with
from
our
other-
partner
yeah.
districts that we would use.
As long as there's no secure information in that.
Oh, yeah,
Mr.
that
Stobie?
makes perfect sense. I don't want to be responsible for that, so.
Yeah, and we could talk about that further, but there might be some, there's roles and responsibilities, but there are some operational pieces in there, and maybe some, sensitive security in nature type.
Yep, that
line
makes
items
sense.
we might have to-
Well, the nice thing is that also the board gets an annual safety and security presentation, so we will fold this part into it as well. But I could absolutely keep you guys abreast to the application, hiring, and vetting process.
Perfect. And then I just have one more, it's going to lead into a question, I promise. But I want to talk about, I did the same as MC, and I took the time to look at the source that was being provided to us tonight that was going to be used in favor of this. And I'm going to preface this by saying something like this, I agree, both quantitative and qualitative data is very important. And I've seen, I haven't seen, I'm not on Facebook, and I hope to keep it that way as long as I can, but I've heard about the heated conversations on Facebook from a multitude of people. And so I respect that this is a very delicate decision that is going to be made. But I just want to point out that, I have a data point from the same source that was provided, and I just don't think it's fair to be stating that members of the board are cherry picking data, because to be frank, I'm using the same data, I'm using the same source that was being used on the opposite ends, right? I mean, we could say the same thing, that data was cherry picked on the other end. So I'm just stating, data is data, it's all important, quantitative, qualitative. But I think ultimately one of the responsibilities of the board is to challenge things, right? And challenging things leads to conflict, but conflict is what leads to change. And if we all just came in here and nodded along, we might not have those bigger conversations that would change things, like allowing us to take a look at the hiring process, So I'm just throwing all that out there, that I think it's important that we all sit here and challenge things. So with that, I had a similar data point as MC, where they were talking about the aversions. And I understand it's, how do you collect data on somebody who's just like, oh man, there's a guy over there with a gun, I'm just not gonna do anything. That data will disappear, that won't exist, right? But it said 57% of peers, student peers, are the ones that averted the danger. 4% were law enforcement officers, but none of them being the SROs. And the rest was parents, guidance counselors, the owner of a drugstore across the street, just random civilians, right? And this is a different conversation. I just want to throw it out while we're talking about it. But we're talking about those different layers, and prevention being one of them. And that data that was shared with us shows that one of the biggest keys of prevention is the community. And so I'm just kind of curious if anybody can answer this, if there's any type of training, and this is like really corny, I'm just thinking about all the airport security videos we had forever ago, see something, say something. Do we have anything like that in MPS now to try to really push that on the staff to reinforce the data that we saw?
So we have some of Sandy Hook Promises programs in our buildings. And one of those is see something, say something.
Okay.
So going to your point about the students reporting and averting an attack, that's part of that process. But I think another talking point to what you mentioned with that is that these students are getting the information, but they're bringing it to a school administrator. They're bringing it to a law enforcement professional or to someone who can handle that situation. There's where the averting is coming into place, right? So when you look at that data, it's showing that these kids are reporting it, students are reporting it, but people who were trained and equipped and authorized to take care of it are doing that, right? So while the data is separated, it's kind of combined a little bit. When
Yeah,
you speak about
yeah.
it.
My point of this wasn't to downplay the SROs or SSOs or anything
No,
like that. It was
not
just
at all.
like, this is clearly a community effort, and I was just hoping we had some type of training like that was already taking place.
And I would say that if we did an analysis of the aversion at the middle and high schools right now, where the SROs are, most of the reporting is coming from kids.
Yeah, I believe that.
Like they're in the know. on what's going down and who's talking about guns or shooting things up. And that reporting is coming from a child most of the time, wouldn't you say, Mr. Nielsen?
Yes.
And it's because of the relationship that the SRO has developed. There's a climate where it's okay for kids to approach the person of law enforcement and say, hey, I heard about something. And that's when then the SRO jumps in and becomes part of the aversion diversion, right? So I would agree that I'm not sure how to peel away those data points. That, yeah, a kid likely, in most cases, in our experiences, are telling SROs. And I don't know if that's how it happened in that study.
I'm sure, I
So-
doubt the kids are tackling each other and stopping things. They're probably going to the adults. I would imagine they are. And I have my long list of concerns and complaints, but I do want to also add in, I appreciate the amount of training that will be required for these SSOs. I appreciate the fact that NPS is pushing them to, I think it was 15 years instead of the 10 years. I appreciate the fact that it's going to be a former law enforcement officer, because they'll have that mentality of things to look for that, everyday people thankfully don't have to worry about, for 8 to 12 hours a day. So there's a lot that I do appreciate about the SSO. Again, I coming into this being critical because it is important, not because I'm not a believer. I just want to make sure that we do this right and that everyone feels safe with this idea, because, again, at the end of the day, this is going to be an armed civilian, yes, a former law enforcement officer, but still an armed civilian walking around a bunch of 5 to 10-year-olds. And we need to make sure that everyone feels comfortable with the situation. So the training, the data points, all these things, they help me, but I just want to make sure that anybody watching is kind of hopefully feeling the same way.
Ms. Brown?
Okay, everyone can hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes?
Okay, just want to make sure. So I really don't want to get into, data is a funny thing, especially with this, because if every school district ran their SSO program the same exact way, then I think it would be a valid conversation to have about data. But as we know, not even in the state of Connecticut would an SSO program look the same here as it would the town over. And so, to me, the data points, I wouldn't be comfortable with any of them, just because what it looks like in one state is completely different. And to echo up what I believe it was Dr. Bukai, it's a little harder sometimes with the background noise. The kids and the teachers are in the trenches. So when something's said, we literally the first to hear it. Conversations, kids saying it, and it's true. The SSO officer often is part of that school climate, that build relationship. It's like relationship building in the school. And the same way if you think of community policing, one of the most successful programs like even New Haven's ever had is like officers on the ground talking to the community, getting to know everyone. The SSO officers in the school just getting to know people so that when something happens, they're like the first to hear it and admin's first to hear it. I don't think any of us want this. And I really can't think of one person, like here, that says, oh, I just love this idea. I don't think anyone loves the idea. I think it's just an unfortunate reality of schools. I had shared, my son had an incident, and someone had sent him like a bloody school photo. They were upset with him. And the thought that, obviously I reached out to admin and took care of it right away, but the thought that there was a police officer in his building, whether she was gonna have to do anything or not, gave a peace of mind. I hope they never have to do anything. But I feel like it gives a peace of mind. I just don't think going back and forth with data is gonna get us anywhere, because, if you read about schools down south, their SSO's officers are used in a completely different way. Like, they discipline kids. We're not looking at that. So that's why I think the difficult part of even discussing any of this data, because not all school systems are run the same way. Not every program looks the same. And that's kind of all I had to say about that.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Just to piggyback off of that, I totally understand what everybody's saying, and I appreciate that, yes, we do have to have these conversations, and sometimes they're difficult conversations. I know that everyone comes to the table with their own perspectives and, interest in doing research or whatever. I did a little bit of my own research, and what I found was, I found all the studies, but I also found that every situation is situational. So each incident is situational, and it might be different. And that makes it really hard to really come up with a true statistical pool that is homogeneous, for instance. It's all very, the word I saw often was heterogeneity, I can't even say it, heterogeneity. And that there is a lot of heterogeneity between studies, meaning that the effects vary considerably across contexts, so that the findings might be skewed one way or the other, or people might misunderstand the findings because of all the differences between each situation. And I think that's, we often say here in Milford, we are Milford, we're gonna do it Milford's way. And I think, whether something happened in Texas or the Midwest or an urban community, all of those situations are gonna be different than what might happen here in Milford. And I don't think people really thought about initially, everybody went to those mass incidences, but considering the everyday things that happen, good and bad, but we're talking about the challenging incidents that happen throughout a school day or a school week. I think having this additional layer in our elementary schools would be beneficial. And I agree that, I'm not loving this conversation. I wish we didn't have to have this conversation, but I do think that this is the realm that we're in today, unfortunately. So, does anybody else have anything they want to share on this?
I have a couple of questions. So first of all, I want to echo, I think it's a hard conversation, but an important one. As I was kind of thinking about this, like, okay, if something, what would help me sleep at night, right? What decision would I sleep better knowing? And it's hard. I am not somebody who believes that guns make us safer, but I also understand that, there are experts in the field that have done their research and have protocols in place for a reason. But I have sort of three specific questions. One, I'd like to hear, going back, to piggyback off of Ms. Gledden's point about how situational this could be, to go back to the incident that happened last Thursday, can you give me a little context of what would have been different if there was an SSO?
I'm not sure that we would have needed all the police department resources.
Okay.
I think you have to look at the fact that building administrators and even educators, right? They weren't brought in for this line of work, right? They were brought in to provide an educational environment for children, right? So when the safety and security piece comes into it, sometimes it stresses out our administrators, right? Like, it's very hard to manage sometimes. Having that trained professional in the building as a support is, I think, very important. Because then that administrator knows, hey, I have this person who has a law enforcement background, who is level-headed, right? Who can assist me with this. And they're already in the building, right? We're not waiting for someone to come to the building to provide assistance. They're there already. So when you talk about an immediate response versus a pending response, right? They're there and they're there to assist them. And they're already familiar with the building and what they do, right? So, like, again, looking into other districts who've had programs for years, their school security officers and their administrators work, hand in hand every day. I think most of them probably know, like, what they're thinking, right? And what they had for breakfast, like, that's how well they work together. I think it's important to have.
Okay, thank you. My second question, I really appreciated the run-through of the types of trainings. How do you evaluate efficacy of training? Because if I'm looking at this feels like a lot to intake in a week. So how do you evaluate the efficacy of training in this
I think
regard?
each training has its different type of feedback, right? Whether it depends who's providing the training, right? If we're doing first aid, AED, and CPR training, right? Like, I just went through it recently. You're doing a skills test at the end, right? And you're doing a performance test for the instructor. You're doing a written test. If it's a firearms qualification with the police department, you're going through a firearms qualification. They're scoring you, they're keeping score of what you do. So I think it's dependent on where we're getting the training, who's doing it, and how they're documenting it, right?
Got it.
But usually everything is well documented. You can see Okay, that they passed it, they're proficient, and they're comfortable with it, right?
Okay. And then my final question is, given Milford's, given the district's commitment to diversity and kind of the data that is not situational on bias in police forces, what steps are going to be taken to ensure that the officers are representative of the population they serve?
I think that would come out through our employment, opportunities that we're putting out there, the application process. How we would post our positions would be very in line with what we do now, with the talent management department. So that wouldn't change. I think we do a pretty good job of that with what we do here. So it's already in place.
Okay, I mean, for that, I would push back on. I have not seen the data. I was told a website where I could locate it, and I tried to find it because I forgot. But I have not seen the data, but I remember the last time I asked the question of the representation of our current population, I was told that it is not necessarily a fully representative workforce.
Okay.
Are you asking if our workforce represents the makeup of our population?
Yes.
Well, I think that's a clear not at this point, right?
Yes.
No. That's a no. That's
And
a
again,
clear
I would
no.
say, like, yes, I don't have the exact data, but I'm saying, like, given that this is, an armed position, an enforcement position, I know not enforcing at the school, but, given the importance of this position and some of the data on bias in police officers, I would like to see additional steps being taken to make sure that they are, at least steps are being taken to ensure they are representative of the population that they serve. Now, I know it's harder given the current administration, but I know that there is still work that can be done to try and make that possible.
So Ms. Tedros, in my limited knowledge of HR recruitment skill set, and Ms. Kapazda could jump in, I know that we could structure our application and interview process so that there's some wording and terminology and questions we can ask to get to some mindset pieces there. So I think it'll be incumbent upon us to really consider the types of questions and maybe even scenarios that we pose to the individuals that we're screening for this position. So I do think we need to do some work on that. We're transparent that we have a lot of work to do in that area. At the end of the day, we can't make a decision based on race, gender, et cetera. But certainly we could create a process that may help us lean into the mindset of those individuals, so.
And yes, I will let other people speak on it. From my experience, it is about how and where you are recruiting, both the job description, the mindsets that you're looking for, the questions that you ask, and also baking in that representation into the interview panel, like who is actually asking the questions, making sure that they're representative as well.
I think it's important to understand, though, that it's a somewhat limited pool of people that we would be drawing from because they have to be a retired police officer with 15 years' experience. I'm not sure what the retirement rates are in the area, the immediate area, the tri-state area. Is it big, small? Average? I don't know.
I couldn't give you a qualified answer on that, but, people, it depends on their retirement programs they have in their specific departments and states. So I really couldn't give you a qualified answer.
We've had this as a goal for a number of years, and it's not an easy goal to reach. I mean, it's proven to be very challenging for us. Just factually, it's proven to be challenging. But I think it's also I know the research and the data that you're talking about. It's has to do more with disciplinary issues, and I think it's important to remember that this position is not going to be involved in discipline. So yes, there's an adverse disciplinary effect on certain populations through the police bias. we're not gonna be, these people are not gonna be disciplining kids. They're gonna be maintaining the safety of the area within the school.
So, understood, these people will be armed. And I think it's very important that we put in steps to
Okay.
make sure that people that are armed in our schools are making the best decisions possible.
When you make
I-
that distinction, yes.
I will also say that yes, inclusive hiring is hard, and there are plenty of organizations that have done the research into policies that make it more possible. Obviously, current administration is not helping it at all, because a lot of what made it super, a lot of the steps that were taken in the last 5 to 10 years have been scaled back in the last 9 months to 2 years, depending on if you're looking at the Supreme Court case or the current administration. But there are things that you can do. And I would like to see Milford, especially in a position that is as visible, as important, and again, armed in our schools. I think it's important to take the necessary steps.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Doyle.
It's total 180 from all of these questions for Mr. Brennan. We've been discussing, it is a civilian. We are insured by Kerma. What will the effect of having armed security guards at an elementary school level have on our insurance policies? Positive, negative, have no idea.
Yeah, I believe it will be relatively neutral in terms of an insurance carrier wouldn't increase a premium per se.
So the risk, in their opinion, is neutral.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments on this topic? Ms. Edmonds?
Just have two more things to say in response to my former question. I really hope, so this is my, how many board meetings have we had in this session? We received the presentation a few hours beforehand. And I did the work of looking at the study that was provided to dig into those numbers and to think critically. I did not use additional studies, nor did I cherry pick data. That was the results section of those two studies that were in the presentation that was shared with us tonight. And so I just want to, part of my statement just needs to be that I don't think we should be setting a precedent, that we should not be reading the studies that are shared with us in the presentations. And then the second point is about the experiential part. One of my friends was one of the high school teachers in Parkland who was killed protecting his students. And so I can't even fully explain how important this subject is to me personally, nor that I do have personal experience with all of it, right? We have different experiences, but in running for the Board of Education, I door knocked and I said I was going to use data and I was going to listen and collaborate and think critically in all of the decisions that I make. And so I just want to highlight those two things, that I don't want to leave this meeting feeling like I was called out for cherry picking.
If I can respond. How I felt in the line of questioning through your emails and just a few minutes ago, I felt that there was only one side of the argument being seen. That the study that I quoted and you read before, as some other board members did, your immediate data point was what you picked, what negated what the other side of the coin was. So you provided data to us, and thank you for doing that ahead of time on Monday. It allowed us to have 2 days to consume that and prepare for tonight. And all that data was the detriment of having armed officers on campuses. So it felt to me in your written communication that it was one-sided. And your line of questioning a few minutes ago, which you say I called you out, but I felt from your line of questioning that you were dismissing the data that I was trying to represent to make the point that there are two sides to this coin. And the only thing I was hearing from you, Ms. Edmonds, was representation of one side. And that's why I talked about, we could sit here and cherry pick, we, not you, data points from other research. Like I have them tabbed up right now. We could do that all night. But my point is that there are two sides. There is mixed effectiveness. So in no way was I trying to call any board member out, and maybe cherry pick was the wrong word, but my perception to even this very moment, that you were only looking at one side. And my point tonight was only to say there's more to this story. That there's not just data out there that dismisses the effectiveness, that there's also data that says it can work. So that was my only point. So I'm sorry if I offended you in any way, but in thinking critically, I think we all, Mr. Scobie, you're right, we need to have these hard conversations right here at this table. And I welcome that. But in saying that, I think we need to look at the whole picture. And you're coming to it with one aspect, and I'm coming, and Steve is coming, and that's the beauty of us being a team. But I just didn't feel, through that line of questioning, that we were looking at both sides. So that's where my thinking was when I responded to your question.
Good. Anybody else on this topic? All right, thank you for this presentation, appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
I'm just bringing my agenda up. So do we have any other questions relating to the budget itself?
I don't have a question related to the budget, but we've had new people join. One of
Yeah,
them-
I was gonna
so,
get there
okay.
next. So, we did have some individuals come in, some have still left, but we have one left. I didn't know if you had any interest in, making public comment. We had done public comment earlier in the meeting. If you do, we'd be happy to entertain your comments.
I have a quick comment.
Sure, just your name and address.
Hannaford, 478 Roses Mill Road. So specifically, as a mom, I fully support having a school security officer. This is something that I feel as though it is important to have that layer of security. And it's something that I know personally that it is very touchy. However, our students come first. Sometimes you have to look at it in a lens where our children and how they are protected is number one. And we have to kind of look at it in that lens.
Thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is actual approval of the budget. Are we prepared to go to that point at this point? Okay. Anybody needs a break? All right, so I'm just gonna go over the process. Would be starting with the motion to approve the superintendent's proposed budget. So it's a motion and a second, and then we have discussion. As part of the discussion, if anybody feels that there should be changes made to the budget, they would make a motion to amend whatever the changes that you want to see happen. It would have to be specific. And at that point, that motion to amend would need a second, and then we discuss that motion to amend. And then you have to vote on that motion to amend before you move forward. So a motion to amend that does not pass, you go back to discussing the main motion. A motion to amend that passes, you then are discussing the budget as it was amended at that point. And then if we did have motions to amend at the end, we'd have to have a final vote to approve either the budget as amended or the budget as presented. Is there any questions on that process? It's all Robert's rules. Okay, so then we'll take a motion from Ms. Doyle.
Sure. I make a motion that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's proposed 2026-2027 budget as presented in the amount of $118,952,091 and directs the administration to transmit it to the mayor.
Is there a second?
I'll second. Everton.
All right, so we have now discussion on the motion. Ms. Doyle?
I think that this has been, I think every year has been very hard with budget discussions. And we're only at the beginning of budget season, unfortunately. But what I appreciate most is that we do have a lot of new board members and the first time going through this budget presentation and asking a lot of questions and bringing good forward, a lot of discussion, that we're able to work with our administration and go through. And it is important to have these difficult conversations about things that, you know, our number one priority is the safety of children and then educate them. And so it's important to hear all aspects and opinions on that. So the bigger question is, you know, why approve without, I think we should approve it without any motions to amend or anything else. I think that Dr. Kataya and your team really spent the time to find all of these efficiencies. And I'm using that word as quotes because they're not efficiencies. They're things that we need in our school district. And I don't have the list right in front of me. I can find it, of $1.7 million worth of things that were taken out that are still needed. They're social workers, there's management information systems, there's reparative equipment, there's fuel for buses, there's graduation, there's test books, there's all these things that are just the tip of the spear where all of these things need to do. And those are just the things that we're doing normally. It doesn't talk about new programs, about having updated student desks. Dr. Kataya shared the story about students in the desk where you got to move them around. I vividly remember sitting in Miss Reshang's class and she made us move those desks around into a U every single AP literature class 20 some odd years ago. So same exact desks. And then, you know, this is the curriculum development. I think we've asked this question every single year is, well, could you do more if given the money? And the answer is yes. And we could do more curriculum development. We could, the cycle went from 5 years to now it's 7 years. Well, students could be 10 years. And how much changed in the last, I don't know, 101 days? A lot. So my vote is to approve this budget as is, and we will continue conversations as it goes forward from the Board of Finance and the Board of Aldermen if we need be.
Thank you. Mr. Scobie?
I'm gonna keep this quick since my monologue before was kind of long, but I echo a lot of what Megan had to say. I appreciate what Dr. Kataya and her cabinet did to keep this budget slim for the sake of the climate of everything that is going on now. Obviously, we all would just love it if it could just be a 20% increase and everyone got a brand new car and everything was perfect and curriculum development was you know, through the roof. But we understand that that's not always the case. So I appreciate it. I'm sure it was not easy coming up with a lot of these cuts. I will say one of the biggest points of contention for me was this SSO program. So I also appreciate that we got to have this conversation tonight. I know this wasn't a fun or easy conversation, but if they're all fun and easy, then I don't think anybody's doing their job. We need to be having the harder conversation. So I'm with Megan. I'm open to proving it as is.
Thank you. Ms. Wolf-Whiten?
I concur with both of my colleagues here that I urge my fellow board members to approve the budget without any amendments, as I will do tonight. You know, I think it has to be said, though, that it's really scary. I think this budget is really scary, as much as I applaud the tremendous work that Dr. Kataya and your team, the work that you have put into it, the very careful thought, the sacrifices. You know, this is another year where we are doing without a lot of really vital things. Will our kids still get a really great education? Absolutely, they will. Will they be safe? God willing, it sure looks like that everything has been done to make sure that they will, and they will succeed. But I feel that we're really at a pivotal moment right now. And if I wish that the budget was in our hands only, and that it didn't have to go out to the Board of Finance and the Board of Aldermen, because I am not convinced that they really understand the leanness, which is a euphemism, of this budget. So I think that it really is all of our responsibility to make sure that the message that every, I was gonna say penny, but they don't exist, that every nickel in this budget really, really counts. And that if we want to continue to have the kinds of schools that we have become known for, that we are proud of, that make us want to say that we are from Milford, that we have to take a more vocal and active role out in the community to make sure that everyone understands the importance and what's happening right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kova?
First of all, I just want to commend Dr. Kataya and your cabinet on putting together another detailed, comprehensive budget that was really easy to go through. I want to thank all the other members of the board, because I was battling COVID for a couple of weeks and I was totally out of it, and I was able to catch up quickly with your 60 questions and watching the video, so I appreciate you getting me a head start on the reviews, so that was really great. It's been mentioned before, you know, there was $1.7 million of cuts in here, and, you know, minimal improvements, and one of the other things is not, there's minimal, if any, you know, repairs and infrastructure improvements in here. We've been deferring that. Now, we do have the long-term facilities plan coming out, but at some point we're gonna have to do some of this stuff, and we've been kicking that can down the road. So I think everybody else covered pretty much everything, and I'm in line with everybody with everybody so far. We're approving this budget as is, knowing that we've got more phases to go through, and I think it's really important that everybody knows that this is really a bare bones budget. Yeah, we've got the security improvements in there, but you know, this is, you know, there's a lot more things we'd like to do that we're not doing. But, so I'm definitely voting as is.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kova, we're not being disrespectful. We're just trying to check the record and make sure that Ms. Doyle read the right number. There's discrepancy on our team as to whether you did. Ms. Filame, did you catch it?
Yes, I had her reading $118,952,091.
Some members of our team thought you said 951,000. You good? Are we? Okay, as long as everyone knows it's the 52.
It's this one, yes.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to
No,
explain
that's
why
okay.
we're on our phones.
I didn't even notice, so.
Okay, all right. Excuse us.
Okay, just for the
Thanks.
record, 1,000,000.
100.
118,000,000. Approved. I'm not good at these. 118
Million.
$1,952,091.
Yes, yes, okay, thank you, sorry.
All right, we're good. Ms. Brown?
You're on mute. There you
All right, there I go, I'm going. So I'm new to this. When I got the budget, I was a little surprised and disappointed. When I ran to the board, one of the things I kept repeating saying they want more money for our schools. And I've said this repeatedly to several people, I want our district to be the model that all other districts look to. I've always thought we had great schools. I'm not saying we didn't. We've always had great schools, but you can always grow. The budget, it's responsible. I think it's responsive to our political and our financial terms. It's where we are. It's the budget for right now. I don't want to keep saying this. It's cut. It's really cut. I mean, I couldn't think of anything to take out. And I guess my message going forward, and this is not really to our board, but to the aldermen, economic development is tied to great schools. Cities don't grow when you don't invest in your schools. And we're not investing in our schools with this budget. And that's not a reflection on the superintendent and her team. That's just a reflection of the money that we'll probably get for our schools. But if you look at any community with great schools and high achieving schools, they invest in their schools. And businesses come to those districts. Families invest in those districts. So I hope that the mayor and all of them are listening, because we need that economic development. And we're not going to attract those people if we're pulling money out of our schools.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Other comments? Ms. Edmonds?
I'd like to double tap what just about everyone has said, which is that I'm so grateful to you, Dr. Tataya, and your cabinet of incredible individuals for answering my 100,000 questions and doing it with a smile. I have to say that I truly walked into this room tonight with not sure how I was going to vote. I appreciated the presentation that we had tonight. I really, really appreciate the efforts that have already been made and putting extra framework into ensuring that the SSO program goes above and beyond not just the statute of the law, but what we've seen in other districts and that has and has not been successful, and thought really hard about training. And I look forward to approving this budget in full and the further conversations that undoubtedly we will have about the program and the next steps to, because like I think it was Adam who said, every single person at this table is here because we care about our kids and our teachers and the safety of our kids and teachers and staff. And so while I echo the frustrations that I wish areas of the budget could be bigger, and I hope that that our climate changes and that we can do more in the next budget, I feel satisfied that my questions have been answered and that we'll continue to have the conversation on the board.
Thank you. Other comments? Ms. Wilhelm?
I just wanted to thank everyone, the administration. I really appreciate all the hard work you've done. I agree with the budget, and that's really it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tedros?
I just want to echo my fellow board members. As a new board member, this process has been intense. I don't think I've ever had a binder hand delivered. I don't think I've done this much homework in a really long time, but it was a very insightful process. And I do want to acknowledge the amount of work that went into passing the budget as it is, and I do support it. But I do want to echo that I think that there are more things that we can do to grow our towns, to grow our schools, to flex our muscles, to flex our innovation muscles, and I look forward to that work.
Ms. Flowers?
So this is obviously my first time going through this process. I really, really appreciated the board and the questions and the dialogue. I feel like I understand the financials better. and I appreciate all of you very much. I don't think I can actually speak as well as everyone here I just think you've all said some really great things. What I do want to, I guess, finish with is I know there's people watching, people who will be watching, who are for SSOs, not sure, and against. And I just want to recognize that I think all three come from the same place of wanting our kids and our teachers and our principals and our social workers, every single person in our district safe. So I just kind of want to acknowledge everyone, that your opinions matter, and that I think it's important to pay attention. Like Dr. Kataya said, we have a safety and security meeting coming up. I believe that's in February. And I think it is just really important for the community to see that the board is doing everything they can to keep the schools safe. And I will be voting for the budget. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flowers. I just want to thank everybody for their diligence. I'm not going to repeat. I mean, I agree with what so many have said. I think I might have said to the newer board members that once you're done with this process, I hope that you see that it's really a learning experience and you really will learn a lot from going through the budget, because our budget is very detailed, despite what some people have said in the past. There's a lot of transparency in it, and we do give a lot of information. But I want to say that this has absolutely been, in my tenure, the most difficult review of a superintendent's budget that I've engaged in. It's been really, really difficult. When I opened the book and saw $1 million in, again, you know, I'm going to put it in quotes like Ms. Doyle did. I don't even know what to call it. It's not savings. It's not, you know, I don't want to say that it is reduction, deferment, whatever. I can't really call it any of that, because when you come down to it, it comes at a cost. And I believe that we're going to pay later in order to keep our district moving forward. But it just, my heart sank when I saw that figure, knowing what went, you know, what went into that figure. And, you know, there's just so many things that we are doing without. And I agree that we should be investing in our kids, we should be investing in our district. And when you consider the $2.8 million the last several years that we have forced reductions, you know, these are reductions of choice. We've had forced reductions as well. And I am worried about what might come. So I think the story here is what we're not doing, what we are not doing for kids in this budget. It's a long list of things that our kids and our staff would benefit from. You know, granted, we might not be taking huge steps backwards, but we are, I think this does take us backwards in a way, because we're not innovating. And I know that our staff is so hardworking, and they are dedicated, and they are very creative. And I know that our kids are not going to slip backwards because of our staff, but we are all committed to doing what's best for our young people, and I just wish we could be doing more. But yes, recognizing the climate and the position that we're in, I wish we could add to this budget, but I don't think it's realistic, so I will be also voting to approve the budget as it was presented. So with that said, the motion on the floor is to approve the superintendent's, that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's proposed 2026-2027 budget as presented in the amount of $118,952,091 and directs the administration to transmit it to the mayor. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, our motion carries unanimously. So thank you very much, board members.
Thank you, board
Anything
members.
to close with,
Appreciate it.
Dr. Kataya?
I'm sorry?
Anything to close with?
I understand how difficult a process this is for you. So we want to recognize the efforts of each board member for doing your homework in a short period of time, reading through lots of numerical numbers, coming up with very thoughtful questions. Our team has appreciated this learning journey with you. So thank you for your work and your support.
To adjourning, we are adjourned at 8:40. 6:55. And we'll see everybody on Monday.
Maybe.
Yeah, true, yes.